The ProPhoto Buttons feature allows you to create and edit small, reusable graphic elements, which can be employed in a variety of ways throughout your ProPhoto site. You can use them for your site logo, menu items, widget images, and many more applications. ProPhoto's included designs, as well as most add-on designs available for purchase, make extensive use of buttons. That means that if you're making your own design based heavily on an included or a paid add-on design, you'll probably be editing some of the design's buttons. The buttons feature is powerful and allows for the creation of sophisticated appearances and rollover effects, so it's worth taking a few minutes to learn how to create and edit them. In your admin area, navigate to ProPhoto Customize Buttons. The first thing you'll see is what we call the All Button screen. Here you can choose to edit an existing button, delete an existing button, create a new button from scratch, or create a new button by copying an existing button, which can be helpful when making multiple buttons that are very similar. Let's start by creating a new button from scratch. Clicking the Create New Button button will load the button editor screen. There's a lot going on here in the screen, so let's take a minute and explain the different parts. The button title is an optional text input field you can use if you like. The purpose of the button title is to help you remember each button and differentiate them from the other buttons. The button title is not displayed on the front of your site to your viewers, just in the admin area for your sake. It is shown in the title area of the All Button screen and in the Choose Button admin dialog when you're actually choosing to use the button you've created. Underneath the button title are the customization controls. These allow you to control what part of the button you're currently editing. Always visible at the top of the customization controls area is the Editing Context Selector. This area lets you choose which broad area of the button you're currently working on. There are three basic options. First, you can be editing general attributes of the button itself by choosing Button General. This gives you access to things like the width and height, border, and background color of the whole button. Second, you can choose to edit one of the button layers. Button layers are where you can add and customize text and images to your button in stacked layers. Finally, you can also choose to edit the layer order, which affects the order in which the button layers are stacked. More on that in a minute. Based on which editing context you've selected, there can be different sub-options visible below the editing context. Next is the customization area. This is where you actually make the individual changes that work together to create your ProPhoto button. The contents of this area change depending on which context you've selected to customize. The lower half of the button editor is the preview area. This is where you will get a real-time preview of your button as you edit it above in the customization area. On the left side of the preview area, we give you a few options that affect the display of your preview while you're working on your button. These options have no effect on how your button displays to your viewers on the front of your site. They only affect the preview you're seeing while you're creating or editing your button. The first preview option is the background color, which defaults to gray. This just changes the background color of the preview area around the button. Change this if you're creating a button with a color scheme that makes it difficult to see against the background, or if it's easier for you to visualize your button against a different color. The checkered background of your button when you first create it is not actually part of your button, it's just meant to show you that your button is by default transparent. So the checkered background represents a transparent background, allowing whatever is behind the button to be seen. The second preview option affects the hover state display. Buttons can have different states when hovered, often called a rollover effect. The default preview option is to show you two copies of your button. One, the hovered state, and one, the non-hovered state. Alternatively, you can choose to instead show the button as it would appear to your viewers, where the hover state is only visible when your mouse is over the element. Let's create a button to show you some of the capabilities of the button editor. First, we'll give our new button a name, and then look first at the Button General editing context. There are two customization groups available when editing the button general context, General and Drop Shadow. Let's start with General. Here you can change the dimensions of the button, set a background color for the whole button. You can also set a border around the button and round the corners. The button border and background color options also have override controls for the hover state of the button, allowing you to make the border and background color of the button different on rollover. You can also set a drop shadow on the button itself by selecting Drop Shadow on the left side sub-context menu. You can then enable and customize a drop shadow and optionally modify the shadow on hover for a more dramatic rollover effect. After you've got the general button attribute set, you can start adding layers. To add a layer, click on one of the inactive layers in the Editing Context menu. This will turn the layer on, and by default, set it to be a text layer. Below, you can change it to be an image layer or turn it back off. Let's leave this one a text layer for now. Like the button general context, editing a text layer also gives you two customization subgroups, General Options and Text Shadow. General Options gives you most of the customization options you need. First, and most importantly, set the text itself for the text layer. Once you have your desired text, you can modify its appearance and then set its position within the button. You can also choose to rotate your text within the button, provided you are aware that a small percentage of your users using the oldest versions of Internet Explorer will see the text unrotated. By selecting the Text Shadow Customization subgroup, you can also enable and apply Text Shadow to your text layer, optionally modifying it again for the hover state. Next, let's add an image layer. We'll select Layer 2 and then set it to be an image layer below the editing context controls. Once you've selected for a layer to be an image, you'll see a button allowing you to set the image. This button brings up the same upload screen you use in the other ProPhoto image customization areas. Here you can upload a new image to your server or select to choose from existing and already uploaded images. Once you've selected your image, you'll see it previewed in the customization area and in the preview area. Plus, now you'll see some additional customization options. First, you can give your image a label. This image label is sort of like the button title we looked at earlier. It doesn't affect the final display of your button at all, but rather is provided for your sake to help you while you're creating or editing the button. Then, you can use the position controls to move the chosen image around within the button. At this point, we realize that we want this image underneath the text and not how it is showing up now covering up the text. To fix that, you don't have to redo both layers. You can simply reorder them. To reorder the layers, at any time select Layer Order from the Editing Context menu. Then drag and drop to position the layers in the stacking order you desire. If you have multiple image layers, the labels you give to the images can really come in handy when reordering. Text layers are shown here with the actual text to help you remember which layer is which. Now that we've got the layers ordered the way we want to, let's get the image and text layers positioned exactly how we want. To do that, we'll select each layer from the Editing Context menu again and fine-tune their positioning. The last customization option for the image layer allows you to create image layer hover effects. If you want your image layer to look the same for both states, regular and hovered, then leave this option in its default state. If, however, you want your image layer to have a modified rollover state, here's what to do. First, create your image twice as wide as you actually want it to display. Then, put the rollover state of the image on the right side of the image. Then, after you set this double width image as the image for the layer, select the second option, split for hover/non-hover states. This will cause ProPhoto to use the left half for the normal state and the right half for the hover state. There are multiple available layers you can use, so you can have more than one text layer and more than one image layer, whatever it requires to build your button the way you want it. When your button is completed and saved, you can click the Back to All Buttons button to go back to the previous screen. You will now see your newly created button visible with the other buttons. If you need to edit the button again, just click the Edit Button button, and you're back to the button editor screen for that particular button. Or, if you need several buttons that are very similar, you can copy an existing button and just make whatever changes you need. Once your button is ready, you need to use it somewhere. The main way to use buttons is to substitute them for regular images in applicable ProPhoto upload areas. For example, in the ProPhoto header area logo customization screen, most people upload a custom image for their logo. Alternatively, you could recreate your logo as a ProPhoto button and select it in the Upload Choose dialog. The advantage of using buttons instead of plain images is that they can have rollover states, making your site seem more responsive and interactive. They're also easier to edit than using an image, which would require a program like Photoshop to edit. Buttons are available to be selected only where they make sense as an option. Some image upload areas, like those intended for use as CSS background images, do not allow the selection of ProPhoto buttons. You can also use ProPhoto buttons in several ProPhoto widgets, including the Pinterest widget and the custom icon widget.